Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, BeefLoaf. This show is being sponsored by our friends Punky's Pizza and Pasta, located at 2600 South Wallace, my personal favorite eatery in the neighborhood. They have the best selection of pizzas and pastas, as well as sandwiches and salads of any spot in Bridgeport. Currently, they have a terrific Monday nights only special. One medium cheese pizza for $12.99. No promo codes, no minimums. Just place the order after 3 p.m. and you get one medium cheese pizza for $12.99. Toppings can be added, but at their normal prices. Hit the website, punkie'spizza.com, for all your carryout or delivery needs, or to cater your next party. You can also call 312-842-2100. The Scarlotta family will take care of you. Punky's Pizza and Pasta. This show is also powered by you, low one weight supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat, because that's how we get paid. It's how we continue to make the content you know and love. Tonight's guest, unfortunately, is just me. It's going to be me here by myself. Many beef loafs. We'll have many beef loaf thoughts this evening. I wanted to get in here and talk a little White Sox. The 108 podcast, we've been focusing more on the fun, all the bullshit and the booze stuff and less about the baseball. And here I've constantly had guests. So we're going to get into a few things that I've been thinking about. Yes, Mrs. Beef, the picture is terrifying. I believe Soxwood made that. And I have him thanked for. I wish he'd come back to the internet. I miss him. So, but anyway, we're going to, we'll talk a little White Sox. Got a few different thought processes here, and love to hear your comments. Anyone who's watching this live, feel free to jump in. Give me your thoughts as we go. Let's get to this drink first, and it's Schlesspap. He says, "Woo, solo beef, because we don't need no stinking vegetables." That's that's right. I mean, that was almost my dinner. I had a steak and I had a little bit of spinach. Mrs. Beef made me. So thank you, Schlesspap. I want to get into some potential moves the White Sox are going to make this offseason, or where we stand on these things. The first one for me is, should the 2025 White Sox love Sosa? And, of course, I'm talking about Lenyn Sosa. He finished the regular season with a flourish, and the White Sox don't really have a incumbent second base prospect flying up that is destined for this spot. So I'm curious to see what the White Sox decide to do. The argument for Sosa, I'll put his stats up on the board. His 2024 season was better than prior seasons, but still below average hitter. He has 642 OPS, and that's 84 OPS plus. OPS plus average, league average is 100. A little bit of pop there. You can see his career numbers are pretty terrible. I mean, his first few times up, he was basically atrocious. It's a lot of strikeouts. It's almost no walks. But in the middle column there, you'll see his September stats. And his September stats are a different picture. We have a guy who hit the shit out of the ball, hit 373 batting average, 398 on base, it's just like a tremendous player there. I think slugging's messed up there. It's photocopying the top. 4 home runs down the stretch. He looked like a totally different player, and so there is some argument to say, look, why don't we just put this guy in here and see what he can do? His late season hot streak though had a 435 BABIP, and what that means is, like, out of the balls in play, almost all of them were falling. League average would be like 300, somewhere in that range. He's hit 435 on the balls that he hit in play. That's not likely to happen again. He did have a 193 ISO. That's isolated slugging, so that means delta between his slugging and his batting average. That's good. I mean, a second baseman that does that is probably someone on pace to hit 20 home runs for the year. He hit 4 home runs in the month. So, like, if that power can keep up, he could be worthwhile there. Some flaws, if we're going to love Sosa, we need to confront some flaws that Lenyn Sosa has in his profile. Number one, he never walks. Okay, and the White Sox have a team full of guys that also never walk. So it's not a great addition to the group. And we'll talk about a couple guys later that don't walk very much either. But Sosa walked during his heater in that month of September, 3.4% walk rate. He had a 3.3% walk rate in 2024 in total, and his career walk rate is 3.1%. Just to give you an example, what the league average is. So this is like the average player walks about 8.2% of the time. So Sosa's swinging at goddamn everything. And I know we're kind of used to that, right? You got a lot of other guys in the lineup. Luis Roberts, a guy who kind of swings at everything, and he's in theory your best player. A lot of these guys don't walk very much, and so Adding another guy who walks way less than even those guys is brutal. The guys who make it with real low walk rates like that, like 3% of the time, they're usually your up the middle, real strong defensive players, shortstop, center fielders that are just elite with the glove. Or occasionally it's a Luis Ariz type that just makes so much fucking contact, it doesn't matter if they need to walk. Sosa is neither of those. He's barely a defender. We'll get to him at second in a minute. And he's nothing like Luis Ariz. He's still going to strike out 20% of the time. He's not anywhere near that. So Sosa, it's tough sledding here. You kind of have to believe in the power and that he'll always reach the power. On defense, it's not great at second. I looked up any second baseman played at least 350 innings this last year. I looked up defensive runs saved, and he ranks 25th out of the group. So that's kind of like bottom of like a starting range at -3, 29th, and now it's above average. But even just watching him, you and I, we see him play second base. It's fucking ugly. It looks like he just doesn't have it as far as like the natural ability there, the instincts, the baseball IQ to really play second base at a high level. And so that's a little troublesome with his profile. The last issue with Sosa, my opinion about whether or not the White Sox should try to kind of keep him here on the roster, is specifically that he's out of options. So if you keep him, you cannot send him down to the minors. He has a bad 2 months. You're just unleashing him, throwing him out there. It's possible he clears waivers, but you got to remember a guy like Romy Gonzalez got claimed, and then he was gone. You didn't see him again. So there are potential issues there with if you decide to make this decision. The guy might be gone if he has a little bit of a rough streak. I want to take a look next at the people that are vying for infield spots here. When you think about keeping Sosa, I'll put a graph up on the YouTubes, and I'll read it for the podcast listeners. White Sox infielders on the 40-man roster. So here's the guys that are currently here. Not all these guys will end up being here when we get to 2025 because arbitration raises or other things, or they have minor league options that get pushed down. But Nicky Lopez, Jacob Amaya, Brooks Baldwin, Miguel Vargas, Brian Ramos, Andrew Vaughn, Gavin Sheets, we'll get to those guys later. Braden Shoemake, I almost forgot about him. And then Colson Montgomery is going to need to be added to the 40-man roster. These are all infielders right here. Now, they're not all second basemen or guys who would play second base, but you start squeezing Sosa's value out here because a couple of these guys are third basemen, right? And so there's less time for Sosa to go over there and play third base. I don't know what the White Sox are going to do with Brooks Baldwin. I don't know if they think, look, he's a second baseman and he's a priority at second base, and that really makes it even harder for Sosa too. Because Baldwin's a much better athlete than he is. He's a much better defender than he is. And so I don't know if they're gonna try Baldwin out short. They're gonna move him back to second. Not really sure what they're gonna do with him. Sosa does hit left-handed pitching, but as aforementioned, like a bunch of these guys are right-handed hitters. Vargas is a right-handed hitter. Ramos, Andrew Vaughn obviously at first. Baldwin's a switch hitter. They have right-handed hitters in here, and so there's not a lot of utility in a guy who. Oh, he hits left-handed pitching, but a lot of these guys fucking hit left-handed pitching. So maybe it's maybe it doesn't matter. Like regardless here. So the White Sox also could, if they wanted to, say to themselves, well, if we don't have a second baseman and we don't really believe in Sosa, they could look at the free agent market. And I'll put the free agents up on the board right here. The valued free agents, the guys I'd be interested in, I don't think are going to be in the White Sox price range. That's Gleyber Torres, who homered in Game 1 of the ALDS for the Yankees. And then I like Brandon Lau, although I think the Rays will probably pick up the club option. And if not, they'll probably trade him $10.5 million there. You have a lot of guys that are, some of these guys hit a little bit like Brandon Drury, but they're not much on defense. And then you have other guys who are probably all defense and no bat, Jose Iglesias type players like that. And some guys that are just kind of over the hill, like I don't want to see Whit Merrifield. I know it's a big Royals thing, but I don't want to see Whit Merrifield in a White Sox uniform here. But the White Sox could choose to go outside and shoot at one of these guys and get a smaller deal in, bring someone in, and then that really kind of crushes Sosa's chances of making the team here. One thing that I didn't put up here, but the White Sox could explore too, is some teams are going to have guys that are second base only, And actually, the question in the comments, Trey, no, Sosa has no options. He is out of options. Baldwin does have options, but they might want to give Baldwin more run, and then that's kind of the issue here. The other thing the White Sox could do, and I don't have a list of these guys, is they could look at other teams that have guys that are either on the Rule 5 bubble and that are like second base only, or on the 40-man bubble where they're like out of options and they might want to give them an opportunity. And like, I think both of those would be potentially as fruitful as keeping your own man Sosa here. I'm not saying to be better necessarily, but you might find something you like better. Maybe the guy's got a better glove, or he walks a little more, he's more consistently on base, or whatever. But I think it's tough sledding out here for our man Lenyn Sosa. I'm not sure he makes it. The last thing, and like they tried him at the very end of the year, and it could be an option here. And we're going to get to some other guys, that play his position, but you could throw him at first base. I mean, Sosa's 6 foot. He's kind of a fake 6 foot, but not as fake as Andrew Vaughn's 6 foot fakeness. He's got much more athleticism, though. Like, the range would definitely be there if you put Sosa there. So his defense at first would probably be just fine once he got used to playing a position. All that being said, you also have Brian Ramos, who you might end up having to push over to first, or Miguel Vargas, depending on how things work out at third base. And then also you have the incumbents. You have Vaughn and Sheets. Should you decide to keep them, we'll get to them in a second. So it gets really crowded at first base, and I'm not sure the White Sox would be willing to just devote, hey, Lenyn Sosa, first base is yours this year, my friend. Like, go ahead and go with it. He'd be learning a new position, and he'd be trying to walk at least, more than his 3%. And that 3% is so horrible. Like, truth be told, if he can just get up to 6 or 7%, and that's just 3 or 4 walks a month when you think about it, that would give him a fighting chance, but he's never really been able to do that. He's kind of just been a hacker the entire time he's been here. If I were guessing right now, I would put Lenyn Sosa's chance of being rostered at like 35%. He's not a great bench fit because he does not play short. Third base, we have a bunch of third basemen. So like the utility of using him at third base is kind of withering away there as well. He does have power though. And that to me, that's the key, because the White Sox just don't have enough power in general. And so that's where the spot where you might want to say, like, look, let's just see if he can make it. If he could turn into a 20 home run guy, even a guy who doesn't walk and plays an okay second base, that's worth sticking with for a couple years. That's not being an issue. I had Joe Sheehan on the Au last week, and he said the biggest utility of a bad team is you have 1,400 innings to pitch, 6,000 plate appearances, and you can find out a lot in that. And so I guess the question for you guys and for me as well is, do you spend some of those plate appearances that you have to throw out there on Sosa? And I'm not 100% sure. I'm leaning towards no, I wouldn't, but I'm not 100% out on him just because the power is potentially worth it if he can harness the kind of the rest of the profile. Let me get to this drink. Singer sucks. He says, White Sox talk, question mark. Just put the Punky's fries in the bag, bro. I want to talk some White Sox, Signor. We goof around a lot on 108 podcast. Today we're going to talk a little White Sox, but thank you for the drink. Sam Reeves says, keep Sosa only if Grady's staying. The only guy who can get anything out of him, hire Grady. Maybe. I not against Grady. I'm not necessarily for him either. Schloss Pappy says, fuck it, give him first base. Don't pay Sheets or Vaughn. His glove is marginally better than those. I think it's probably even more than marginally better with the range. And if he goes all in bat first, he shows more. Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I don't know if they'll go for it. There might be some first basemen out there that they might be more interested in, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's totally fine. So nothing real bad to say there. But I would lean towards Sosa's probably not back with this team. Next topic is one I know you all know and love. It is what to do with Vaughn and Sheets. So these guys, very controversial. The Andrew Vaughn Arbrays on the Twitters was got a lot of people fired up. There's 4 potential ways to go with this. We'll just outline them really quickly. Scenario 1, the White Sox cite continuity in an ever-shifting roster, and they choose to keep both these guys on the roster, despite seemingly prohibitive arbitration costs, given a team that wants to cut salary, and their lack of production at the respective spots. They don't hit enough for the spots that they're playing. But the White Sox say, well, they're good guys, they're good in the locker room, and we don't want to turn over the whole thing, so we keep these guys in here. Decision number 2, they decided to tender Andrew Vaughn a contract on the strength of his performance after June 1st. We'll get to the stats on that, but he hit much better after June 1st than he did kind of early in the season. Who couldn't? And a non-tender Gavin Sheets, freeing up a spot for at least one of the young guys to hit more, to play more. Scenario 3, the White Sox decide they don't want to spend $6.4 million on Andrew Vaughn, and that is quite a bit for his production these days. And they decide to tender a contract to Sheets, who does fit as a left-handed bench piece. He can play first. He can kind of fake the outfield, although you and I and everybody else doesn't really want him in the outfield very much, but he can pinch it off the bench as a lefty. He's not finding he hits right-handed pitching decently. And scenario 4 is they decide not to tender either of them a contract. Cost savings, and they'll utilize those plate appearances in a different way. Let's look at those arbitration raises. So I'll put them up on the screen right now. And this is the whole group, actually. MLB Trade Rumors does a pretty good job of projecting these numbers. So if you want to go to their website, you can check out what arbitration raises are expected to be kind of across the league. But these are just the White Sox ones. Nicky Lopez, God bless if he gets $5.1 million next year to play for the Sox. But anyway, staying on point. Andrew Vaughn expected at $6.4 million. Gavin Sheets expected at $2.6 million. This is Andrew Vaughn's second year of arbitration. So he had an arbitration raise last year. This is Gavin Sheets' first year of arbitration. So he's never had an arbitration raise. And so $2.6 million is a lot more than the $700 or $750,000 he was making last year. That'd be a nice tidy raise for him. Let's do the argument for keeping Andrew Vaughn first. He's got the pedigree. Okay, he was picked third overall, and then his numbers did actually pick up in June. I'm going to put a little graph up here. These are White Sox qualified hitters after June 1st. Vaughn's batting average up to 271, 450 slug, 115 WRC plus, 15 homers, 51 RBIs since June. The counting stats aren't great, but he is extremely durable, so he does end up with kind of a lot of counting stats in that instance. He's a long-tenured White Sox. Again, like I mentioned before, if they don't want to turn the roster over, this is a guy you can kind of keep there. You know what he is. He's nothing fantastic. He probably doesn't have a lot more upside left in his profile. There's just not a lot more there to go for him. He's, like I mentioned, he's super-ass durable. And so he's going to ring the bell every day. He gets there, he's going to play, he's going to be in the lineup. And coming off of a team where you had so much injuries, you might be like, okay, well, I want that safety blanket right here. I know the guy's going to show up. I know the guy's going to actually, play, and he's going to play 150 games. So maybe I want him. I will put the graphic back up there for you, Mailman Jack. That's the 4 qualified hitters right there. You can see Lenyn, Sosa, and Luis Robert faring not as well as the Andrews. Since June 1st. The things against Vaughn, and they're not so obvious things, I think, to the average Twitter user, because the arguments I see for him are borderline hilarious. They take no context at all in the fact that while Andrew Vaughn looks like he's about a league average hitter, when you put in the context of first baseman, and we'll put this out of 250 plate appearances minimum for first baseman, because some first base are platoon situations, so you can't not everyone's playing every day. Vaughn is 32nd out of 46 of these people in WRC plus at 97. He's 26th out of 46 in slugging at 402. This is for the 2024 stats. And he was 40th out of 46 in on-base percentage at 297. Those are not good numbers. Those are really bad numbers, actually. For season-long numbers for Andrew Vaughn. The other things against him, it goes without saying, you can eyeball this one and know he's a very poor base runner. Just doesn't move very well. We make fun of his little legs going when he's running hard. It kind of cracks me up seeing it. But the defense is where it's absolutely atrocious. When I looked up the group of first basemen playing at least 350 innings at first, his outs above average, he was 42 out of 43 first baseman. That's how bad he was. He was almost the very bottom, -9. And for defensive runs saved, he was 38 out of 43 first baseman at -4. He's just an absolute butcher over there. He's a DH. I had my guy, My Sox Summer, tell me, we were at a game this year, and he said he thinks Andrew Vaughn can't concentrate on more than one thing at once, and he performs better as a DH. Doesn't have to worry about playing first base. And I don't know if there might be some truth to that, but at a minimum, he doesn't harm you when he's at DH because he doesn't have the glove on. And he's just brutal with the glove. And he's tried to improve. I'm not shitting on the effort. I know he's tried to improve. I can tell he's tried to improve. He just can't move. He's just not athletic enough to move. And so it is what it is with Vaughn here. Let's flip over to Gavin Sheets. Let's do the argument for Gavin Sheets. And I think Gavin Sheets might even have a better argument than Andrew Vaughn. Sheets has one minor league option remaining. So in theory, you could take a Gavin Sheets and send him to the minors at any point you need to. And that's a very nice thing to have. It's very nice to have a little flexibility in the roster and be able to put the guy down in the minors. And so super valuable, number one. Sheets number two has a 109 OPS plus versus right-handed pitching and 123 OPS plus at Sox Park. So if you decide to use Gavin Sheets a lot less, not play him every day, not put him in the outfield, he's totally serviceable, decent guy coming off the bench, and he's only $2.6 million. I think it's reasonable to say, oh, we can have this guy here. We're not planning to have him start, but if things go wrong, he can step in and play first base for a month and against the righties, and we're totally fine here. We can use him in tough spots. We can give the rookies, these young guys, a day off when there's a real tough right-handed pitcher out there, and let Gavin Sheets hit him. Gavin Sheets can handle it maybe better than these guys. On defense, he's not as bad as Vaughn, but he's not good. He was 17th in defensive runs saved out of those aforementioned 43 first basemen with 350 innings and 30th outs above average. So not good, but not bad, kind of in the middle of the group. But you got to understand, he's basically just a bench bat at this point. And do the White Sox, cheap-ass fucking White Sox, want to spend $2.6 million on a guy who's a bench bat? Like, you're not carving out every day at bats for this guy. You can't play him against lefties. He just can't hit lefties at all. I know we have it burned in our head that he would do that little, dink the ball into left field against lefties, but he stinks against lefties. He's absolutely horrible and should never see the field against lefties. And so I don't know if you wanna bank on that. And lastly, he lacks power for a guy he's huge. I mean, he's way bigger. I measure myself against these players. My height, I'm about the same height as Brian Ramos. I'm a little thicker in the middle than he is. And I'm much taller than Andrew Vaughn. But Gavin Sheets is bigger than the BeefLoaf, and he's got bigger shoulders than me. And he can't hit home runs, man. He get, what do you have, 8 home runs last year? Brutal. And so you get tough with the power, and he's going to be 29 years old. He's getting up there in years. So those are the things against Gavin Sheets. If I were in charge, I'd get rid of both of these guys. I'd probably just let both of them go. I think probably what ends up happening is that Vaughn gets kept, and they try to DH him most of the time, and they'll put him at first when they need to slide one of the younger guys in there at DH. But if I had to choose between the two, perfectly honest, I would probably keep Sheets if I had a commitment from whoever the manager is. And Grady did a good job of this at the end of the year, to never put this guy in the outfield unless it's an absolute fucking emergency. I'm talking emergency like the game when Jermaine Dye had to play shortstop because everyone got kicked out. That's the type of emergency. That's the only time I want to see Gavin Sheets in the outfield holding a glove. That's the only time. But I think mostly you let go, but gun to head, if I had to keep one, it would be Sheets in this particular instance. Now let's get to a drink here from Trey. Trey says, drink, let both first basemen go. I pretty much agree with you. I think you try something else there. The same idea with the second baseman. You can look down teams' rosters and see who's a 40-man crunch, who's a Rule 5 crunch that you might want to pick up. There's decent free agents at first base every year. So, I mean, like, there's always options there. And the downsides of those guys are probably a little bit worse than these guys, but not a lot. So you can either take a big risk and see if you can hit some upside, or take a smaller risk and maybe even you improve on the defense side and maybe don't, the hitting could be up and down. But thanks for the drink, Trey. All right. Next up, and this is something I I don't know if I've heard a lot of talk about this. A little bit of tweets, but not too much. Is the White Sox bullpen, and we made fun of the White Sox during the contention window. We called it the Super Bullpen. We made fun of Rick Hahn spending all his money in the bullpen, and it got me thinking. Like, I want to do a quick run through this bullpen for the last 2 years. So in 2023. I put the image up on the board. The White Sox were kind of tied to a roster full of higher-end bullpen options that weren't terribly effective. There were, you had Liam. He had cancer and he was out for the year 2023. So he's the one guy kind of missing from the discussion here, and he had been very he'd been very good when he was pitching for the White Sox. But you had Joe Kelly, you had Kendall Graveman, you had Aaron Bummer stinking up the joint. You had Jake Diekman from the 2022 trade deadline when Hahn basically just like took the Red Sox salary dump. You have Ronaldo Lopez in here. Ronaldo turned out much better after he left the White Sox. When these guys are struggling, you couldn't just send them down. You couldn't just send them down to the minors. These guys were guys on decent contracts. You were board locked with your bullpen, and you had to. Your only way to get them out of there when the guy's struggling his ass off. We saw it in 2023. You kept rolling these guys out there until the trade deadline when you just got rid of a bunch of them, and they kept stinking it up. And the only way you can get around them, fake injury. Tell Joe Kelly you're hurt. All right, Joe Kelly, you're going on the IL because you fucking stink, and that's the only way to really get around them. And so they had this board locked bullpen that was atrocious, and they kind of traded out of it, and thank goodness it added a little flexibility. However, starting 2024, my man Chris Getz and Brian Bannister, they're like, well, we're going to put together a bullpen on the cheap. So they trade off Gregory Santos, which I thought was good. While his stock was up, they kind of got rid of him. But otherwise, they went out and signed John Brebbia, Dominic Leone, Tim Hill. They traded for Jared Schuster and Steven Wilson. Wilson came over in the Cease trade. Jordan Leisure came over in the Lynn Kelly trade. And this opening group, along with Kopech and Tanner Banks, who were decent. Tanner Banks was actually good. This opening group fucking sucked. And the problem with sucking like this so bad when you're trying to sketch a bullpen together, yeah, Trey is right, Brian Shaw. That's my guy, Brian Shaw. I don't know why they even kept him on the roster. He was getting absolutely crushed in spring training, but thought, well, we'll keep him on here. He's a good clubhouse guy. But these guys are getting absolutely crushed. And it was one of the worst things possible because when you're putting together a team that you know is bad, those bullpen pieces turn into depth pieces in your minors. And they fucked up every single one of them. The only guys they could trade were Banks, who was already an incumbent. It's kind of like a long man, journeyman guy. So they got super lucky they were able to trade him. And then Kopech, who was already here, who was kind of like lined up. And a lot of people don't think they got even enough for Kopech. But the guys you went out and bought, you didn't get shit for any of them. You had to fucking let them all out on the street. And it's one of the hugest mistakes of the first year of Chris Getz's GM. I don't hear a lot about it. I hear my guy Nicky Beeps shitting on them for this and a handful of other people. But not a lot of people have given them enough shit for how they screwed that up because they spent money in this spot, and that's where you're supposed to return at least depth pieces for a farm system that is starving for depth. But luckily, they decided, okay, fine. These guys didn't work out, and we couldn't trade them. These guys are fucking gone, and we're going to start pawing through what we have left. And one of the things that they did, which I hope they can learn from, is they took Mike Soroka, who I was really high on before the year, and who sucked as a starting pitcher. I mean, he was horrible as a starting pitcher. Almost cost me the steak dinner bet. He stays in the rotation the whole year, I'm going to lose a steak dinner bet. I win that narrowly by 5 runs. There's no way I win that if Mike Soroka happens to be a guy who stays in rotation. Instead, they put him in the bullpen. And thank goodness, because once they did, over 36 innings and 16 appearances, my man's at a 39% K rate, 2.75 ERA, and a matching FIP. He turned out to be really fucking good out of the bullpen. And I hope one of the things that these guys learned is, well, let's look at some failed starting pitchers and see who can ramp themselves up instead of grabbing, the John Brebbias and the Dominic Leones and the Tim Hills of the world. Go down that path. Go down that path and see what you can do and find there. At least the White Sox did tinker, though, and by the end of 2024, they had a very different looking bullpen. I'll put the graphic up there. Here's their bullpen by roster resource. And these names, other than Schuster, who started in this bullpen at the beginning of the year, basically as a long man, are very different. Justin Anderson, Fraser Ellard, Prelander Baroa, Gus Varlin, Andy De Los Santos, Haro Uriarte, Jake Eder, and the aforementioned Michael Soroka. I don't think Iriarte and Eder are going to be in this bullpen next year. I think they're going to go back to the minors and they're going to start. But if you look at the rest of the group, and Michael Soroka will move on with his career. I don't think he's going to be here next year. But you look at the rest of those guys, generally effective, and with the exception of De Los Santos, they've got minor league options, which means you now have a bullpen that, unbelievably, you can shift guys up and down. if a guy is struggling or has got arm fatigue or whatever, you can move that guy down to the minors and get a fresh arm up here. And that's how modern bullpens are built. And the White Sox have been so far that for so long. It's crazy. And it's exciting to see that it does look like this. Now, this bullpen, by the time we got to September, they were 12th out of the 30 bullpens with 3.56 ERA. Their FIP was lower, it was at 4.22. But this is great coming from a group that was basically dead last the whole year. That was getting dragged by some real terrible performances by some of these arms. And now, I don't want to put too much stock into their performance in September because they played a lot of dead-ass offenses. They played the Angels a couple times. You played Cleveland. You played the Tigers. You played a lot of teams that don't hit very much. So let's not assume that they're great or anything. But a lot of the performances here were outstanding. Varland and Baroa and Ellard, basically, for the three, for me, that really showed out. I mean, Prelander Baroa was received in that Gregory Santos trade along with Deloach and that draft pick. And Baroa was better on the stretch than Gregory Santos. So, I mean, like, that's something to build on. It looks good. And guess what? We have that. I'm going to put the graphic back up so you guys can see that they have all these guys and they have a lot of minor league options. But there's a lot more waiting in the wings right here. The guy that they got in the Robbie Grossman trade, I'll call him AHT because there's no way I could pronounce his name. The guy they got in the Eloy trade, Trey McGough, Josemir Cousins, Peyton Pallette, who shot up to Double-A quickly, and was dominating there as a reliever. If you still believe in Jordan Leisure and Steven Wilson, they're here for you. They got options, and maybe they'll have a resurgence next year. I'm not. I found myself not as big of a Jordan Leisure fan because he doesn't appear to have the strikeout ball in the major leagues. But if you like those guys are also here on the periphery, and so it just seems like the White Sox bullpen is better built than it was even 18 months ago with the flexibility that they have. And now if I'm them, I still do add an arm or two. I still do spend a couple bucks and hope to trade those guys next season. But this looks like a group that you can get off of some guys if they're struggling. If any of these guys, and yeah, that Clutch Hat says Ellard, Baroa, and Varland should all be here next year. Agreed. And I think they will. But if they're ineffective, it's okay because they got minor league options. Just send them to Charlotte. Someone else, a fresh arm, comes back up. A lot of these teams, that's what they do during a year. They just revolve the arms. They bring the fresh arm back up. Okay, that guy has been ridden hard for the last month. Send him to the minors, give him a little rest. You get him just a tiny bit of work, but you let that arm recharge and someone else takes their spot. And the White Sox do look like they've transitioned into that position, which I like very much. It's one of the few things that, like, it came out of something bad. They should have gotten more for these relievers, but they didn't. So a bright side, if you will, from that stuff. And yeah, I wouldn't be he says, give somebody with actual closing experience like $10 million and just say, fuck it. I agree. Like, get a low-end closer and then look to trade those guys. And actually, truth be told, I'm not married to anyone in this bullpen currently either. What they did with Gregory Santos, with getting Baroa, who was basically a replacement for Santos, plus some other shit, they should be doing a lot of that. Keep doing that. I don't mind if they want to trade some of these guys. All right? Go ahead and get back in it. This is like where it could be a strong point for the White Sox if they can flip out of these positions regularly and keep adding. They need to keep adding. The depth thing is huge. We saw with the last group. We didn't believe it, and then we saw it come to fruition. We said, well, they have enough depth. But they got the superstars. Don't worry about it. And those guys start failing, and now you have no depth, and you ain't shit. And we saw it. We don't want to see it again. We need more. We need more depth, and keep going. If you have to trade some of these guys to get that depth, it's fine. There's no problem with it. Last thing, heading into 2025, then you guys quit hearing me blabbing. The opening day starter for 2025. I want to predict it right now because I want to get my name out there saying this before anyone else does. I was talking to Mrs. Beef about this, and I asked Mrs. Beef, who do you think is the opening day starter for 2025? And right off the top of her head, she said Jonathan Cannon. And I think that's a strong choice. I'm going to put a graphic up on the YouTube screen listing the 5 starting pitchers for the White Sox at the very end of the season. You guys all know Garrett Crochet was in there. Sean Burke, Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin, the Dart, and Chris Flexen. My guess is that Crochet is traded. I think it's, as much as I would love for Crochet to stay here and just dominate here, I think they're in a spot where they feel like they're not going to turn it around fast enough for him to be effective. I don't think they're going to give him the money he wants. I think he thinks he's going to get a lot of money. And so I'd let him gamble on himself, unfortunately. And so I would probably trade him. Chris Flexen probably won't be here. Despite his valiant effort to get 160 innings. I mean, good for him. Shitty ass fucking team. No run support. And the guy battled every single fucking game. And he wasn't good all the time. And they had to put him on in the bullpen because he was bad sometimes. But he battled back. And he pitched better in the second half. And I respect him for that, for going out there and taking the ball like that. But I don't think it's going to be him. So you kind of get down to these three guys in here. Burke only made a handful of starts. He was very effective, but I don't think he's going to be the man. And then you got John Cannon and Davis Martin. Let's leave those two for now, being like the two front runners. The White Sox also had a couple guys who were injured at the end of the season. Pull up the injury list right now in Kai Bush and Drew Thorpe. And no, I don't think Mike Clevenger will be back. And God forbid if they sign that motherfucker again. Like, there's just no reason to bring him back. But it just wouldn't shock me. He's like a friend of a minority owner or some shit. He's like a buddy of somebody, and that's why he keeps finding himself back here. Jesse Schultens, I don't think will be in the rotation, even though they list him as a starter. He got his accounting degree. I mean, he might be better off doing what I do. I'll put in a good word for him. Actually, if we're hiring, I'll bring him in. But Kai Bush, I don't think Kai Bush starts on the Major League roster. I think they're going to push him back down. He just didn't look right at the end of the year for seasoning. Drew Thorpe, I hope Drew Thorpe is ready by the time the season starts. My buddy Josh Nelson's a little worried about it with the surgery and everything. But Thorpe looked good before he got hurt. And then those last two starts, he looked kind of junky because of the injury. So I'm going to count him out. I'm going to say, well, maybe he makes the rotation, but he might not be fully healthy, and so he's probably not going to be the opening day starter. So we're back to John Cannon and Davis Martin. To me, the reason I want Davis Martin, and John Cannon was nice. He was the third in innings behind Crochet and Flexen for the White Sox this year, which is impressive for a guy you weren't even expecting to be in it. And he was a totally reasonable, palatable pitcher. I just want Davis Martin, though, because he was with the team in 2022. He battled back from injuries. He even learned a brand new pitch. His changeup grip was something brand new. Kind of learned how to do that on the fly. His interview with Jeff Passan, when ESPN came in to take a look at the team, while a lot of reporters were coming out and talking to us fans out there, which was exhausting. Although my guy Sam Anderson wrote a great piece about me and the boys. But Passan went in the locker room and talked to these guys. And Davis Martin just seems like an affable, like, hey, fuck it, let's go for it kind of guy. And I hope he ends up getting the spot. And I'm going to put my finger down in there and say that's my prediction. I predict Davis Martin, the Dart, will be the opening day starter next year. He's got the seniority out of the group, especially if Garrett Crochet is traded. And I would love to see it. He's just kind of a goofball who's made it, and no one thought he'd make it. And he pitched good in 2022, and he pitched good this year when he was up. So I'm hoping for it. I'm hoping that it's Davis Martin. If you guys want someone else, go ahead. Feel free to throw it up in the comments. Trey says Burke was impressive. Yeah, Burke was impressive. And then Ian says Thorpe will be fine. It's just a bone spur. Okay, well, I hope so. Any injury, it always concerns me. And then he says Davis Martin's a great dude. That's what bleeds through in the article. So I hope that is the case. Clutch Hat says Flexen will get another deal with someone. Yeah, I agree. I think he will. I think the White Sox will. They just won't take. Like, I think he fits fine on this roster, but I think they'll take something they perceive to have more upside. So I think it's going to be the case there. Real quick, Trey says, how can they get Ramos and Vargas both regular bats? One of them will have to play. One of them will have to DH or play first or play the outfield. I mean, like I think that's part of looking at the Sheets and Vaughn calculation is you might need to get those guys off the roster just to open the spot. I think there's there's a reason for that there. And I don't know what they're going to do in the outfield. I don't know what they'll do with Dominic Fletcher. I assume Benintendi and Luis will stay in their spots and that no one's getting traded there. But that's for another show. I've talked on too long. It's probably boring to listen to me talk this much. So just want to we'll end it there. Next week's guest, nobody. Taking a goddamn week off. We've been going hard. What a way, going hard. We'll take the week off next week. In 2 weeks, My Sox Summer's going to join me on here, and we're going to give away the GFY Awards. So that's, if you don't know what that is, I'll be putting out some videos this week to make sure everyone is on board, understands what's going on with the GFY Awards. We'll do that. There's also no 108 podcast this week, so you're going to have a full week without the 108ers. Anyway, thanks to Punky's Pizza and Pasta and all you in the 108 family who was up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like buttons, tips and drinks and comments and all that shit. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.